Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I am very thankful to be speaking for EA Zoom. Thank you so much, Linda, Wanda, and Olive. I'm here to speak today on relationships and astrology. Can we get along? As Linda said earlier, please, if you have questions during the talk, please feel free to interrupt as we need or save it to the end. One of the main important parts that I find with astrology is that astrology is the path to self-discovery. And what better way to learn to pay attention to the planets than by not only seeing how the relationships and the aspects work in our own personal lives, but also how they play out with others. I like this picture of the monk sitting on the edge because, you know, a lot of times, especially when it comes to a relationship, it takes a lot of effort to sit back a little bit and observe, not to be triggered by things, and understand that each of us has our own way of operating in the various levels, as we're going to explain in the talk today. So when we're talking about aspects, we're talking about aspects which create communication or a relationship between two or more planets. For example, a Saturn trine the moon is going to feel like there is good support for getting one's needs met, whereas a Saturn square moon is going to feel like one's needs will be frustrated and or not met. Challenging aspects require attention and effort, and the pain of the challenge is painfully clear to each partner as it is to those around them. Whereas supportive aspects are usually gifts or simply an easier way or a flow that goes along that makes it easier for two people to get along with one another. And I really don't see that there's really any difference whether the aspects are in a person's chart or whether the aspects are between two people. But through the use of astrology, it gives us the tools that we need in order to help us understand not only why we may have issues of relating to another person, but ways of how to improve our communication and relationship to one another. So I did this little table here. On the left-hand side are the aspect patterns and what the basic meanings are in astrology, and then also how it would look in relationship. So with a conjunction, which is when two planets are really close together, so you think of a new moon, you would, in astrology, we look at that as an intensification or a twin energy and a new birth, a new experience, something new is coming along. But in relationships, it's one of those things where there's an alignment, there's an energetic alignment between the two people. And sometimes it can feel like a hard way to understand that there's a difference between the two. You know, if you think of like, a conjoined twin, you know, and you're bound to the partner, you know, say maybe you both have the same sun or a moon-sun conjunction, there could be a way that you're going to feel so connected and understood by the other, at least in that part of the chart. The opposition, of course, is a fun aspect. It is the full moon, and it gives, in astrology, it's that other or out there. It gives us that seesaw act of going back and forth until we seek balance. And it, of course, brings up the sign of Libra. And in relationship, it can be about projection or blame, meaning that, you know, looking across at your partner, you may sit there and go, oh, you're the powerful one, or you're the weak one, or I blame you for all of my problems. And then in relationship especially, it's really important to realize that any of those things that one is projecting onto the other person are things that one has to own within themselves. The square is one of the real fun ones because it's one of those aspects that really comes out of nowhere. It keeps coming out at you and attacking in a sense until you really have to deal with it. In astrology, we look at it as a dynamic tension, kind of like a surprise or an accident. Like when you're driving down the road in one direction and someone comes from another direction and T-bones you. That's a real, you know, classic, which is also a T-square, of course. And in relationship, it's kind of like, oh my God, where did that come from? I thought we had that resolved. Why do we keep having this issue that comes up for us? You may ask yourself that in your relationships. As far as a trine, in astrology, we look at it as kind of like not much work or flow and that things come very easily. And in relationship, there's a flow of understanding. It works a little bit better when there's some effort, and because there's an elemental resonance, there's just a way, you know, that water works with water, earth works with earth, fire works with fire, and air works with air. Then with the sextile relationships, these are opportunities for support. These are good supportive energies. And in relationship, I like to think of it as kind of like, you know, those things that need one another. So it's like, you know, when you have a lot of earth, you need someone with water to help your earth not be so dry so you can actually grow plants in it. When you have a fire and you don't have any air, your fire isn't going to grow large. So, you know, bringing in a relationship that has some air is going to help bring up a little more of that fire. And then finally, the inconjunct or quincunx, which in astrology is about synchronization. It's these two two planets or points that do not get along either by element or by modality, and therefore have an issue of trying to understand how they work with one another. And in relationship, it's one of those things like, how do we relate? How do we get these parts of ourselves to communicate with one another in a way that we feel seen, met, and heard? Am I going okay for everyone so far?
Yes, really good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. And the other thing that I found over the years, again, what I talked about in the beginning, these are about observations, and one thing that I like to do is observe. And one thing that I've seen over and over again is when people have complex aspect patterns in their chart, like a T-square or a grand sextile, or a grand square, and then one piece is missing, or they have two parts, like they have a trine, but they're missing that third to make a grand trine. We often find people in our lives that we kind of magnetically draw into ourselves that kind of fill in these missing points. So, feel free to, kind of do some exploring for yourself. See, like with your own chart, if you have some complex patterns that are missing a point, maybe a grand trine that needs to go out to a kite, you might look at where those other points are and then look to see who you have in your life who has planets in those points. So you can see kind of how important they can be to you. Excuse me. And I'm going to do a lot of visuals because I just think astrology can get so heady and can get us like out of this place of being able to really understand and see how things are. And so I referenced earlier, as far as like, with the opposition being the full moon and the conjunction being the new moon. If you think of the circle as like a poker player, and you're playing with people across the table from you, that person that's sitting right across from you, that opposition is so easy to see, and it's so easy to see what's going on. But if you're looking straight at that person across from you and you try and look to the right or to the left, it's going to be really challenging because you're going to just see it almost like as a corner of your eye. And that's what we mean when we talk about a surprise happening. Like, it really feels like it comes out of nowhere. And speaking of visuals, this is something I worked on a few years ago. It's called Astro Theater, Astro Cards. And what it is we've taken each one of the planets, dressed them up in the signs of each of the signs. And so on the left, we have Libra and Neptune. Let's see, right here, we have the moon in Cancer. We have Mars in Aries, and we have Saturn in Capricorn. All squares, all cardinal, of course. So this would be what we would consider a grand square. So what happens when we have grand squares is we have this point where they're all trying to come into one another, trying to communicate with one another, but they're coming out at these angles, and they create like a crash in our system. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so much. How can I handle all of these points coming at me as once? But what we need to do is maybe it's easier. Maybe we have some sort of a supportive aspect to one of those. It gives us kind of a key, a way in to relate. And the same with having a person who shows up in our life. Maybe we have someone who has, maybe instead of that Saturn in Capricorn, maybe has a Venus in Capricorn, and is able to, kind of bring a little bit of loving compassion into that, that grand square a person might have in their chart. Woo woo. So, of course, conjunctions are about blending or fusing two energies or archetypes to create or birth a new third, something never seen before. Think of a couple having a baby, or how a couple come together to make a third energy called the relationship. Conjunctions can also act as twinned energy, especially as in conjoined. Sharing planets on the same point create a very close connection and bond, and sometimes it can be really hard to differentiate. It's kind of like that part of you that's always there, and you can either take for granted or realize it's easier just to go along with what that other person wants, and maybe acquiesce some of your power or control. The squares are about blending the modalities, which of course are the cardinal, fixed, and mutable. The squares create surprising experiences that come out of left field. They're compulsions. They're things that continue to act out. Alan Leo has a great line for it. He calls it the only evil aspect. I don't really believe anything evil, but in that sense of where the personality has to deal with the ongoing issues of having to resolve a conflict so as to deal with what the inner inharmonious issue is, it's going to continue to act it out, and especially in relationship. I don't know if any of you know of the poem called A Life in Five Chapters. It starts out with, I walk down the street, there's a hole, I fall in, I can't get out. It takes me some time, you get out. Finally, the last chapter is, I walk down a different street. But it's this thing of like, we have to get tired of ourselves in the squares. We have to wear ourselves out so that we can finally realize that, in the place of where conflict has existed, we want harmony. That it's a lot easier just to kind of do what we need to do to go about doing the right thing. Oppositions and sextiles are about blending supportive elements. Fire needs air, earth needs water, and moving away from projection and into self-responsibility. It's important in the case of the opposition to work on the idea of blending. I like to think of the opposition as like, of course, a seesaw, but the seesaw isn't just this black point and white point or whatever the absolutes are of either polarity, but it's the ability to negotiate any aspect along the continuum at any time you need in order to be in healthy relationship to what's getting presented. That's really the goal of what the opposition is here to teach us. Sextiles show a more focused combining harmony than the trine as it blends the supportive elements. And I love this. This is the opposition in action. It's all your fault. This is Neptune in Libra saying this to Mars in Aries. And then, of course, Mars and Aries will say, no, it's all your fault. And then this is really the goal, is to find, harmony and self-responsibility, because what are we talking about? That's what this axis is about, especially the polarity between Aries and Libra, self-responsibility and harmony, which are both really important for each of them, as well as the opposite. It's really important for Aries to have harmony, and it's also really important for Libra to have self-responsibility. The trines are about the elements supporting themselves and understanding how they work with the modalities, fire, earth, air, and water. And they can be less than a positive as in a comfortable spot or trap. Shared modalities means a shared perspective. When I talk about a comfortable spot or trap, people who have a grand trine in any of the elements, it's a closed circuit. And so in that place, it can be this spot where not only is there a level of comfort that individual is having from having that grand trine, but other people can have ideas and projections around those ideas around someone having the grand trine. Because everyone, for some reason, considers the grand trine to be a holy grail. The quincunx or inconjunct seeks stability using different modalities with the elements, fire with earth or water with air, which are not accustomed to speaking to one another. Everything is out of sync but must communicate. I feel like in that sense, like when one starts attacking or one starts focusing on one's quincunxes and inconjuncts in one's own chart, as well as in relation to other people, you're really kind of stepping onto a little bit of an advanced path. You're really kind of taking on something that has a little more of a, the nuances aren't as strong and graphic. And so you're trying to figure it out. I like to think of the inconjunct as sitting on a fence waiting act. There's this inherent tension in it and that wants to get working with one another. And here we have trine. We have Mercury in Virgo visiting Venus in Capricorn. And it's like a slide. It just brings this ease with which, either one can work. It works in both directions. So let's see. We're going to then make it now a little bit more about the exact. So say you have a Mercury in Pisces. The opposition is going to be someone who has Mercury. When you have an issue of bringing someone in with Mercury and Virgo, this is going to be a position where you can have that opposition, where you can have that projection, where you can have this, especially with Virgo and Pisces, because Virgo is going to want to, you need to do the right thing, Pisces, and you need to buck up and you need to have some structure and all that. And Pisces are like, you need to loosen up, Virgo. But they're each telling the other one rather than listening to what either one is saying and taking it in. Then, of course, with a square, from that Pisces, that Mercury in Pisces would be squaring Mercury in Gemini, someone who has a Mercury in Gemini. And then that's just going to be like, it's always going to feel like it's coming out of left field, especially for, it's going to be the case for each one of the squares. But, Pisces, Mercury in Pisces is going to be kind of going along, having a nice, lovely daydream, barely, maybe connected with the ethers, and then Gemini and Mercury and Gemini is coming in and starting to ask a bunch of questions, and Pisces is going to say, no, leave me alone, I'm floating right now. And then the trine, because it's going to feel supportive, you know, when that Mercury in Pisces person meets a Mercury in Cancer person, there's going to be an ease and understanding. There's going to be, oh, you want to talk about feelings? Oh, I understand that. These watery elements. Okay, I understand these sorts of things. Let's hang out. Let's merge, because then this is in water, of course. So this is one way to think of conjunctions in one's chart as well as in relationship to another person. It's like having two people and you know, inhabiting the same body. There's something very very joined or conjoined. This I look at as kind of an opposition. You know, you just keep looking at it. You think you're seeing something different, and you can go deeper and deeper. And it's, you know, however you get the reflection. That's a square. It's always coming out of right field. Trine or conjunction, especially water. Then I get into a little more nitty gritty. So this is what I really enjoy doing with people. I find it to be so magical to sit and do a chart. So on this is Richard Burton on the left and Elizabeth Taylor on the right on the inner wheel. What I do is I put the planets up, and then I put where they are in the signs. This is immediately when you sit down and talk with people, or when you work with anyone who's a couple or anyone who's in relationship to another, this is going to share so much information with you as far as what's going on with the dynamics in the chart. So can I get this to move? There we go. Excuse me. So if we think of the archetypal ways in which each of these planets mean, you know, the sun is going to be the way each partner is going to shine out in their life. It's going to depend on whether they're a night birth or a day birth. That's going to affect it. It's going to affect, you know, what kind of relationships does each person's sun have with other planets in the chart. The moon, how do they feel nurturing? If one partner has a moon Saturn square and the other one has a moon Venus conjunction, they're going to have very different ideas about what nurturing is. Also, depending on how the relationship of the moon is to one another, you're going to see how they can nurture one another in their relationship. If you have a moon that's squaring one another, there's going to be a challenge in the way the couple is going to be about nurturing one another. And so, you know, finding ways like, oh, you know, explaining that, you know, in this case, Elizabeth Taylor with her Scorpio moon and Richard Burton with his moon in Virgo, it's a wide sextile, but it means, you know, Elizabeth Taylor's going to have a little bit more, you know, she's going to have a little bit of a biting moon. She's going to have a, you know, a little bit more of a needy, intense moon. Whereas Richard's going to have that moon that's going to be like, you know, it needs to be a little more perfected. You know, I'm not sure if I'm doing this the right way. So there's going to be, you know, a challenge. You know, each one of those is going to have an effect on how they do it. And then also then how, not only how they approach their own lives because of their own natal chart, but then when they're in relationship to one another, how then these are going to speak to one another. Mercury, I feel, is crucial. These are people's communication styles. We've got two mutables here, so we've got a nice square. So, you know, one's going to be, what's nice about this is they're both involved with truth. You know, Pisces is the search for the truth of all that is, and and Sagittarius is the search for learning the difference between the truth on the lowercase t to the uppercase t. Like, okay, who am I as an initiate? Who am I stepping out, seeking these higher philosophies? You know, so the nice thing, even though this is a square, they're both ruled by Jupiter. So I'd want to look and see how Jupiter's playing out with their charts. But a lot of times this is going to tell you a lot about how their communication style is. Venus, how the people value, you know, how each person values. If you have someone who has an Earth Venus and you have someone who has a Fire Venus, they're going to have very different approaches about what's important to them in their lives. It's going to be a very different experience. Mars, how does each person deal with their desire and their ability to go forth? You know, a person with Mars on the midheaven may feel very overpowering to someone, say, who has Mars in Pisces and the bottom of the chart. Jupiter, of course, is our ability to seek larger philosophies, to understand our larger ideas, how we are generous with ourselves and with others. Seeing how those relate to one another is going to see, you know, if there are going to be any issues. Like here, we have that there's a square with Saturn and Sun. This is a Leo Capricorn in conjunct. So it's going to be it's going to be kind of interesting. I mean, one thing we do know about this couple is that Richard Burton hello Capricorn, lavished her with material gifts. Here she's got a Leo, Jupiter and Leo, that's the king, that's the queen, please show me how royal are. She actually owned jewelry that belonged to royals. So it's just funny how these things kind of play out with these archetypes. Saturn, how we go about doing our structures, how we have our own authority. When it's involved with that moon, sometimes that authority can be a little shaky. Well, what do you think about me? Do you feel like I have enough authority to be able to tell you no? This is also going to be a person's boundaries, how they handle the issues of saying no. Someone with Saturn in Pisces is going to have more boundary issues than someone, say, with Saturn in Capricorn. The ruler of Capricorn is going to be able to say no, or it's going to be able to figure out a reason, how best to say no so that it works to his or her advantage. Chiron, of course, very crucial because it's going to deal with the wound. How each person not only experiences and has their wound for themselves, but how it is with the other. In this sense, it's really nice to look, because we're getting into the slower moving planets, how when we're in someone in relationship with someone closer to our age and having someone who has a similar Chiron, it kind of helps to understand, because we probably are going to have a similar kind of generational wounding. And that'll be the same truth with a lot of these from Saturn outwards. You're starting to get into these longer evolving orbiting planets, and therefore you're getting into this area where you're not only talking about the individual, but where the individual is then part of a collective, larger generational group. Surprisingly enough, for Uranus, this is another one that I find is really crucial, is to look for what are the freedom points that are being played out on a person's chart. Namely, one can look at Uranus, of course, but you can also look at some of the different signs. What kind of planets do they have in Aquarius? What kind of planets do they have in Sagittarius? What are the freedom-seeking signs? And then what is Uranus doing in relationship to all of that? I find that one of the hardest things in relationship for people to give one another is freedom. We want it for ourselves, we demand it, and yet it's one of those things that we tend to have the hardest time allowing others to have. But the truth is, if we can create a healthy place for our relationships to have the freedom, healthy expressions of freedom, we're going to be able to relate to one another in a much healthier way over a longer period of time, coming from a place of satisfaction and not from a place of sensing that there's some sort of control going on between the two. Neptune and Pluto, I would say these are going to step in a little bit more, especially when you're talking about them in relationship with more of the personal planets, meaning anything between the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. I would find that these would be even a little more realistic. But I'm going to step back a second. When you're working with people, is the important thing is always to ask people. So, when, starting to ask, like, okay, well, how is the spiritual self expressed in relationship or in each individual? It'd be a gateway question to be asking with individuals in Neptune to see if there's a consciousness of that playing out in the relationship. And of course, the same with Pluto, what kind of transformational aspects, if one person has a very strongly placed Pluto, hello, I'm talking to you wonderful, brilliant EA people. Someone has a really powerfully placed Pluto, that other person, if he or she isn't aware of what that means, is going to need some coaching on how to be present for that sort of an energetic blast and how to use it to the best possible means. I was thinking about go a little more in exact with their charts, but I'm just wanting to kind of lay it out a little bit more. And so you can see kind of like how I do it. I welcome people to do however they need to do it. I just find so much information in laying this out, and then in explaining it to couples. What we tend to do in our relationships is, first of all, we tend to fall in love with people for very specific reasons. And then later on, we usually end up resenting them for it. Or we project our own stuff that we aren't dealing with ourselves onto the other person, the things that we're not willing to own. But either way, there's a reconciling that has to happen, as far as we go into a relationship. Or maybe you see that, you continually draw these certain types of relationships into your life. The question is then again is, okay, how do I take into a place of being neutral? How do I look at myself as far as these patterns that continue to play out in my life? Why do I keep drawing these kind of people? And understanding it isn't about those other people, it's about you. And that's really crucial. Any questions? I'm covering a lot of material. Perfect. Okay. I was just thinking, within Elizabeth Taylor's chart, Moon opposing Chiron, squaring Jupiter. And then here is the Saturn and the Sun right on it. So it's funny how these things kind of key in, but this would be something that would really run a lot of her life. And I would think that she's actually going to draw, and it's funny, she didn't do it with Richard, but I would imagine she's going to draw some people with someone, with around a 15-degree Aquarius planets. Aquarian energy really is important for her for grounding this energy. Then I brought up some of the people we enjoy talking about. But, in looking at these, you can kind of see what plays out in these relationships and why there might be problems. On the left-hand side of the chart, I've got the two charts for Donald and Melania. And on the right-hand side, I have what's called a 90-degree dial or a Uranian dial. What I love about the Uranian dial, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is it's something that gives one the ability to see immediately what's called fourth harmonic issues. The fourth harmonic issues are all of our challenging aspects. So the conjunction, the opposition, and the square. It's like it just brings it up right clear. And so, here we see, a Moon Neptune square, that's not going to feel very good. A Mercury Chiron square or opposition. Let's see, Mercury. Let's see. And then Venus to Mars. That's, when that's in a squaring relationship, that's not, that's not really pretty. Especially with his Mars, the way she is as her feminine self. And in Taurus, she's, that's a lot of strength. There's a lot of force in that. And unfortunately for her, it's in her 12th house, so it's hard to access for her to hold it with that strength. But then, his Mars is squaring that, and then of course, just what I talked about here, he's got his T-square, Mars ascendant squaring that descendant, and opposing his descendant, squaring that Neptune. It's a T-square, and then what is he drawn for his relationship? Is, here's someone who's like holding this place for him. It'd be really interesting to. It's funny because when I think about this, I look at Mercury and Venus and Taurus, and within the 12th house, it's like I would love to hear what their pillow talk is. Not love and meaning that I'm obsessed with anything, but it'd be very interesting to see kind of like what the ideas are that go through her head about what she's experiencing. And then as a nice change, David Beckham, the soccer star, and Victoria Beckham, one of the Spice Girls. Here then we have this other, this is the other thing I really look for in relationships that helps. Mars-Venus conjunction in both directions. That's sexy. First of all, it's an air sign here. So, there's going to be a way that they can, probably talk about their ideas and be able to like experiment and play and have fun. And then it's in this, in Pisces. So it's going to be, they're just going to really feel each other and want to and merge. So just really, these kind of things really show off nicely with people. And then, a shared Chiron and then Chiron Sun. This can either be really super problematic, meaning that sun is going to shine a light on that wound, or because, with Victoria having her Sun Chiron conjunction and maybe having done her work with dealing whatever her issues are of her self-image and who she is as a strong female person, can help him. And to be honest with them, there are a couple that are really beautifully blended, I think, in their masculinity and their femininity, and aren't afraid to express that other side within their relationship as well as to the public. Then we've got a Saturn Ascendant thing, which can be painful at times because it can be, that Saturn can get a little bit heavy, but it can also feel, like a real strong supportive element. Really lovely. Like a ground in a sense, especially when it comes to Saturn. So the key things that I would look at that is to make sure that that Saturn, the ascendant, that the person with the Saturn doesn't seem to be overbearing, or the person with that ascendant there doesn't project or perceive the other person as being overbearing, but try and find ways where they're actually helping them. The Saturn person is helping the ascendant person to have a little more authority in that place of being a Cancerian. Another wonderful point to look at with charts is something called golden aspects. And these occur whenever you see conjunctions between Pluto, Chiron, Venus, and Jupiter. These kind of give, and maybe if you have a chance, go back and look at your charts and see people who you've had in your life who you've been close with and have had these wonderful sense. But these are the people who, no matter what they do, you love them. So like if you have a Pluto, say you have Pluto at 15 Capricorn and your lover has Venus at 15 Capricorn, there's going to be a way in which you really love and support one another, because that Pluto can go to the depths of intensity in that place of Capricorn, and Venus is going to be there right alongside with love, with compassion. Beautiful, beautiful combination. And any of those sorts of things as they play out. But it's interesting to see that, because see how it plays out with your chart. When I've seen a good friend of mine, Leslie McGurk in Florida, she's a wonderful astrologer and medium, and she got me on this. And I've seen it over and over again in my life that there's these people where I have these sorts of conjunctions, and it's like no matter what they do, there's just like, it's like there's a hardwiring between those two that gives an understanding and gives an ability to connect with the other in a way that doesn't feel threatening. Then I think it's really important to see what I call the weighty aspects, which are the points of where there are Saturn conjunctions. Where are there Saturn conjunctions? I have a Saturn conjunction with my partner, with his son. I'm older than him, and it works in that kind of a sense, but it's also one of those things we've had to really be careful of, because it was very easy in the beginning for him to say, oh, you're such an authority figure, oh, you're this or you're that. And then I had to really work at making sure to bring light to the way it was being perceived, so that I was being seen and not the aspect. Because that's a really important thing. When you're in these relationships with people, listen to the words that your partner's using and see if they're using words that are connecting with you, or whether they're words that you can use to kind of help them find who they are in this place of exploration for themselves. Past life aspects. I mean, I really shouldn't be telling EA people. I mean, you guys all probably would be telling me way better than I would even be able to know. But I think conjunctions between the planets in the South Node are really, especially the South Node, especially Saturn. There's some other ways that it really shows up. Those are the ones I just kind of easily look for. And finally, homing aspects. When a person has a sun and your partner has the moon with the same sign, it's nice. There's just this way. It's just it's complementary. So it's just it's both sides of the face, and so it works to be able to really be able to understand and be able to talk with one another. And there's just a feeling of home. If you're wanting to learn more about this relationship, I'm going to be teaching a class for Kepler College this fall. It might even be this winter. You can stay tuned for that. And you can contact me at my website or my email address at michael@cormichael, or my website at cormichael.com. And that was my fly through the world of relationships. And of course, I'm not even touching, as far as doing composite charts or doing Davidson charts. I really think the fun thing is with astrology is find a way that you can find a way to relate to it. That whatever your doorway is, there's so many different approaches, and it's just a wealth of information to be able to have available. A question? No. Okay.
Okay, any questions, anyone? Please go ahead.
And they can be personal questions too. Like if you have an aspect of the partner that you're trying to understand, I'm more than happy to see if I can divine anything.
Hi, Michael. I have a question. How do you does squares, if a person has a natal square to the moon's nodes in their chart, and then they have a partner that activates that square with their own planet, how do you kind of see that?
Well, my sense is, first of all, because it is a challenging aspect, you've got, there's an adversarial energy. So the key, first of all, is to find out, is it an adversarial energy that you can join in with to deal with what that issue is for yourself, or is it someone who's going to play that out so you don't have to see what that is for you? Do you understand what I mean?
Can you clarify just a little bit?
So I would say it would be something like, my sense is that what would happen would be I would have to figure out when my partner is acting in a certain way that's really irritating to me, are they doing that to really irritate me, like say on a personality level, or are they irritating me with that to help me get through it? It's our perceptions of it being adversarial. It's our perceptions of it being a challenge is when I say like that. So it's like, the question is, are you going to perceive that person as being the agent who is creating that tension? Or are you going to be able to, or is that person going to operate in a, can you communicate with that person in such a way as to say, hey, you know what? I would really love your help looking at this issue. And I feel you have a very, you might have a clearer viewpoint for it. You might have a different perspective that can help me resolve this issue for myself.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, I really like that, Michael. So each time a difficult aspect takes place, you have the opportunity to deal with it in a different way, in a better way, thereby transforming the relationship, and then you'll find the partner, you've connected, you've communicated, you've listened to each other, and thereby changing your patterns in the future. What do you think?
Yes, but especially like with what Wanda's saying is not only is it something that's getting activated in the couple between the two charts together, but it's also in her chart. So the thing is, because it's coming from a squaring position, the key for Wanda is it's kind of a complicated sense in this, is that Wanda has to resolve whether I would say that it requires some communication with your partner so that you can work with building a relationship of meeting the challenge in a constructive manner rather than meeting the challenge in a blaming or it's his fault or her fault. Does that make more sense?
Definitely. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yes, because personally, in my own experience, we've had certain experiences over the years that have been very difficult, and I have not been able to get past them. But now I have the strength to approach these problems differently and transform that whole area, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, it is. And then it's so satisfying too when we realize, I think it really is this element. Aaron Sullivan used to say this, like, we have to get sick and tired of ourselves. Whatever it is with those challenging things, we have to reach a point where it's like, you know what? I would much rather give up whatever this drama is that I keep creating in myself, and I want to choose something different. And once we step into that place, once we finally reach that, and no judgment, no criticism, because we all are going to reach it whenever we reach it, whether it's, when we're in our 20s, whether we're in our 60s, whether it's this lifetime, maybe it's next lifetime. But it's like, at some point it's going to get resolved. And my sense, I mean, I have Mars in my midheaven, so I'm a bit of an insertion person, but it's like, you know what, I would rather get it done with. So I'm like, let's roll up our sleeves and get it done.
Yeah, beautiful. I've got Uranus on the midheaven.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
And
I
here
do
you
like
are. I mean, this is beautiful. I'm writing a book on people with planets on the midheaven, and so I will be talking to you.
Oh, yes, I'd love to. I just wanted to say something about Scorpio energy, that
Yes.
If one of the partners, or even if both of the partners have a strong Scorpio element, like I have a strong Scorpio, I've got a North Node Scorpio,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes I feel that the partner wants to actually see how I deal with difficulties, and is, very penetrating into me and seeing, and challenging me. But then with Scorpio, you're able, you have the strength to transform things sometimes, instantly, in kind of a magical kind of way, and to deal with those really heavy emotions. And that can be very satisfying too, to be able to, not be overcome, but to actually take up the challenge and transform.
That's such a great point, because I think, there's so many people who, through either their own, what's the right way to say this, maybe ill-advised understanding of astrology, or through the ill-stated aspect relationship for a chart. But I mean, the idea that people have that a chart is bad or that it's challenging, is like, no, we all, I feel energetically, I feel it deeply within my being. We chose that moment of birth for a very set purpose. And I believe, I think EA, from what I understand, believes it as well. So it's like, why would we from a soul level ever pick something that we couldn't win, or something that we couldn't really resolve? And so the thing is like finding the ways, and that's the key, and hopefully by the time we reach a certain age, usually like especially after our Chiron return, we finally reach this level within ourselves where I think there's a certain level of structure and a certain level of maturity that allows us to finally go, oh, that's really silly that I keep doing it that way. Or, what, I don't want to pick that kind of person in relationship anymore, especially those of us who, maybe were raised, I have a Scorpio moon at 29 degrees. So I'm squaring my Saturn in Pisces. So, I totally understand when you talk about that level of intensity. And also too, I have to deal with that energetic thing of like, okay, is there a pinched energy, or is it just my perception? Because my viewpoint coming from that Saturn moon square is so small and so tight sometimes. And I have to teach myself that that is not what life is about, and that it is really much larger, and that it's really okay, and that I'm safe. The real key thing with the Scorpio.
I love that. But also the partner can give you that space that can allow you to play that out.
Beautifully said. Yeah. And I thank you for saying that again, because that's the important part, because those of us who do have strong Scorpio complexes, I really feel that we are doing a duty for the collective, because we're willing to go places that others may not be willing to go. And especially in our relationships, I think it's so crucial. We end up playing these roles for people. And, if our partner comes to us with it, it's important to be able to learn how to deal with those issues of transformation.
Exactly. And, some things can be really difficult on an emotional level. You can be so overcome with the emotions, and it can be very challenging. Like my partner and I have Chiron conjunct Venus, both of us. So my Chiron conjuncts his Venus, and his Chiron conjuncts my Venus.
Golden aspect.
It's a beautiful, and I'm glad that you mentioned that earlier on with the conjunctions with those outer planets. I think they were Pluto, Chiron, Venus,
and Jupiter.
And Jupiter, yeah.
Yeah, the two benefics, and like Pluto's the one you kind of go like, oh, really? And then Chiron in a sense, because, when you resolve that, because that's such a great seat of power within each of us.
Absolutely. And it really allows the relationship to continue in a really good way. I don't know. I'm just speaking on a personal level now. So
I think it's great. And so congratulations, because that's such a wonderful thing. And when you think about it, especially when you think about that Venus with Chiron for both of you, it means that either one of you in your most wounded space the other one is just there with love.
Yes, exactly. Like my most wounded space, which I never share with anybody, that's very much what Chiron is about, was exposed about a month ago to my partner. It was so painful, but he came back with love. And my God, it was so healing. It was beautiful.
And that's where where you then feel that unconditional love. And I mean, who better do you want in a relationship to than someone who you can continually visit that space and know that you're safe there?
Absolutely. And also because Venus is the relationship planet, the higher aspect of Venus is unconditional love. So I suppose everyone can apply that at any time to accept their partner unconditionally. That's a really good rule to have.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I'd like to open up to anyone else here with any other questions. Please go ahead. Or comments.
I have another question if no one else
Sure.
has one. As far as, say, parent-child parent-child synastry,
Mm-hmm.
Venus, you mentioned the Venus-Pluto
Mm-hmm.
being a golden aspect. And now I don't know my mother's birth time,
Mm-hmm.
but her Venus conjuncts my Pluto. Now, I also have Uranus conjunct Pluto, so that might be the
A little bit of a rub there.
yeah. The spoken wheel there. It's always has been a very painful relationship. Now she's a very strong Pluto person, as so am I. So I don't know if that makes a difference or what.
Sure. Well, and then, and you probably already know this, but one of the most important things I find is to put your, I mean, what's nice with that is, I mean, regardless of when your mom was born during the day, unless there were a few days difference, chances are you're going to be pretty close time-wise. But to look at your mom's chart and to look at your chart on top of it and realize that when you were born was a transit for your mother. And depending on what those transits are to her personal chart, can be how she's going to perceive you your whole life. And this is like when you see these, it happens in every family, like each sibling has a very different relationship with the parent because each child is a different transit for the parent. And so that's the whole lifetime. So like if you're going through, like if your mom's going through a painful Pluto transit when you're born, you're gonna, you're wearing that vibration for her for the lifetime. And so the question I would have with the Venus, Pluto, with the Uranus in there is that did you have a sense of like that she really does love you, but that the consistency that there were shocks or that there was a lack of a consistent energetic sense of it for you, but there were times that you did feel it?
Well, I'll just go ahead and put it out there. Now, this didn't come until much later. I always felt that my mother was jealous of me, and she actually admitted to that.
Okay. Do you have any Saturn? To me, that seems like a Saturn Venus or a Saturn Jupiter relationship, maybe.
I have Saturn in the 7th house, and you mean as far as my Saturn to her Venus?
Yeah, between the two of you,
it would be opposing.
Oh, so well, then there we go. Okay.
Would you like me to put Wanda's chart up?
Sure, please. Thank you.
Could you please stop your share at the top of the screen?
Yes, stop share. Perfect. Yep.
Just give me a minute.
Sure. Thank you. Wanda, I mean, that to me right there, Wanda, I mean, because whenever you see Venus and Saturn in relationship too, it's going to be issues of worth. So, whether she's, and again, what do we talk about in the talk today is, whether being in opposition, it's a projection. So it's like, this thing like, what I like to think of, it's almost like this, like hot potato in a sense, like with that is like, no, you be the authority. And then your mom is like, well, if I'm the authority, then you be the beautiful one, or you be the loving one, and I'm going to be the stern one. You know, it's just this, it flips it back and forth because it's trying to get this balance between, okay, well, what is, because I would say with the Venus Saturn opposition, the key is like, okay, how do we get to have love that has really healthy boundaries? And with that Pluto being there, you know, the hard part is, especially because, you know, from EA, when, you know, we have that Pluto to the, you know, when there's Pluto to any of the contacts with the others, or at least this is my understanding with EA, you know, that there's really a pretty strong charge there, and, you know, and possibly maybe something that maybe had happened in the past. So I don't know how EA looks as far as, you know, I mean, I guess I should just ask.
I'm not exactly sure what your question was.
I
You
was
lost
just
me there.
asking, like, you know, with evolutionary astrology, what would one say about a Venus Saturn conjunction, or Venus? I'm sorry, a Venus Pluto conjunction.
I'm not sure as far as the synastry. I haven't gotten, you know, as far as my studies haven't
Okay.
gotten there yet.
Okay.
But it's just from a natal, you know, looking at that
Yes.
natal
Right.
conjunction, you know, I would think that even the relationship would look the same, and it can be very possessive,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
very manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
which really describes, you know, describes our relationship, my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with her.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, you know, how I look at it too is, I mean, if that's, you know, if that's sitting, if she's got her Venus over here in Virgo conjunct your Pluto, Uranus, um, I would say, I mean, look at, you know, you've got Saturn, Mercury, Chiron, um, and I'm sorry, is this Lilith? Like
Yes.
Lilith? Yeah, I mean, that's this, I mean, and this is Demeter. I mean, this is a huge, I mean, and you've got a huge stellium going on in Pisces, and your level of sensitivity in relationship to other is pretty acute. I mean, to me, this is like a Princess and the Pea kind of a syndrome. So maybe what I'm wondering too with your mom is that, you know, in those in those very nuanced energetic states between the two of you, were there areas where she maybe played energetic manipulation with you and where you didn't feel? I mean, we've got Saturn over here. So to me, and with Chiron and Mercury, there's something that's going to involve some issues regarding boundaries for you, where you didn't really feel like you had the opportunity to have boundaries in relationship to her. You know, and then with that
Spot on.
Venus, and that Venus and Pluto together, I would say, you know, that would be one element of it. And so one beautiful means of being able to maybe, you know, work with her would be like acknowledging the fact of the powerful female energy in that you two share, and maybe working on things that allow to acknowledge that the strengths that you have within yourself are things that you've maybe learned from her, but also maybe built on within yourself as well. But anything that's going to help bring your mom a sense of not being able to, like, if you're the more of a blank slate a person is, the easier it is to project onto a person. So, you know, what could you share with your mom so that she maybe sees your humanity, feels your humanity, or is actually able to understand and feel your boundary when you don't want her to invade your energetic space? Sorry, I might be getting too personal too.
No, I mean, you're really hitting it on the head. It's just like I said, with her being such a strong Pluto person herself, she's Sun conjunct Pluto.
Oh.
Boundaries. Yeah.
So Sun conjunct Pluto in Leo, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, not easy. And is it anywhere near your moon?
No,
Okay.
but her North Node. Oh, she also has the North Node in Leo, and
Okay.
it's about 5 degrees away.
So it's funny because it's like almost like I feel like there's this energetic mirroring between the two of you. Like you guys are kind of like moving forward, but just slightly out of sync with one another. And it's just almost like this thing of like, you know, what would it take? So one thing that I always see, and I always feel that the older souled or the more conscious being in the relationship is the one who's in charge. Sorry to break it to you guys. But so that means that when we become aware of certain things and everything, what can we do to help make that change for the other person? My sense is, you know what, you know, and you get this Venus, beautiful Venus, well, I know it probably hasn't, Venus moon opposition. I mean, here it is right as well. I mean, you've got these elements in it. You know, what would it take? And it's a 12th house moon. What would it take to address these issues in your mom? Because this is not only something that's going on with you, but I feel like this is also a family lineage issue that you may want to, you know, her with that sun Pluto, yeah, she's going to roar. She's going to feel, you know, you're going to think that you're going, you know, you're going to, what you need to understand is she has a thorn in her toe. And what you need to do is you need to find a way to approach her in a safe, non-threatening way to be able to remove the thorn in a loving manner so that leonine heart can radiate. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be, honey, you are strong in your own right.
That's why we clash.
Well, but you know what? It's finding a way to do that and honoring the strength and realizing you're on the same side. Because that's really, you know, that is so much what this planet needs right now. I mean, we've got to really get out of this oppositional energy. And we've just got to find ways to show that we have so much more in similarity with one another, and to find these ways to, you know, to understand, you know, like, hey, you know what? It's crazy, you know, the way, you know, men aren't the only ones who are messed up on the planet. You know, the female lineage has had its share of horrors within itself as well. And, you know, and we all, you know, we're all here to heal this, you know, and finding ways to help, you know, yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
Hi, Michael,
Hi,
Carol.
Carolyn.
Family history had it that when my mother was giving birth to me, she thought she was going to die. And it came from a cousin who was a friend dying from a botched abortion for a 7-month baby, or a baby that wasn't allowed to get to 7 months. And I'm wondering, a whole lot has come up in the last half year or so. Childhood traumas have surfaced, which I'm not going into. But I'm looking at my 4th house with the Pluto and the Ceres. My mother, I realize, whether it was literally, physically, or with what I would say, which would embarrass her, she always thought I was going to kill her. She was a Capricorn.
Well, sweetheart, right here, I mean, guys with Scorpio moons isn't really easy. And I think women with Scorpio Mars, especially, this is powerful. This is really super powerful right here. And then, yes, I mean, there was some aspect of, you know, a protection issue that went on here. So I'm sorry, your question.
So I'm just looking to see in the chart where it would show that I realize now she thought I was going to kill her. I grew up in a house of mixed messages. You're wonderful. You're going to embarrass me and I'm going to die. And I'm wondering where that would come from. I think it would come from the Pluto Ceres. I think
it's really funny you say that, because usually what I find with that is a key point right here on the ascendant, a planet on the ascendant, and I'm not seeing that. But what I'm hearing you say is Mars in Scorpio and Venus, Neptune in Libra. Those are the things I'm experiencing you say. And so, I mean, I think this alone, this is a what's the right way to say it? All right, I'm just going to free flow a little bit with this. So some aspects of this is something about your ability to, well, I mean, of course, Mercury and Scorpio, I mean, hello, I had this ability too. It's like, you know, with that Mars and with the Chiron, you picked up on the energetic fields of what were going on and you said what you felt. That's very threatening, especially, I mean, I'm not sure what your age is, but I would imagine from the age that you grew up and in the age that, you know, that those time periods were, it was, you know, children are seen and not heard. You know, women aren't able to express that sort of a thing, whatever it is. And so for you, your big issue is finding how to be that person who can speak the truth of transformation, because I mean, South Node here too. I mean, this is something you've done. I mean, you were ostracized for it. You were, you know, then what do we have? We have 16, yeah, and then Pluto's, yeah. Yeah, and then Pluto's squaring, Mars. So there's some really good work called bioenergetics or core energetics. It's what I was trained in. It's a body-oriented psychotherapy. And to be honest, anyone with a lot of scorpionic energy, it's really helpful for it, because the key is that what we have to learn is that we are really tough and we have to surrender. And the surrender is not death.
Mm-hmm.
Our fear is the death, because it's whatever that death is. What we have to do is we have to be able to release it, surrender it, give it all up, and be able to see what it is. And through you being able to express, because I don't feel that you probably got to express your primal rage, I don't know whether that was about being born. I don't know whether that was about, you know, having to do another relationship with your mom, with your family, you know, whatever it is, there's something here that's there's a real primal, and especially because then it's mirrored between that Pluto, you know, Pluto Mars, you know, because it's rulers of Scorpio squaring one another, you know, how you can figure out ways of expressing your energetic rage so that you can release that pool of upset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you've nailed it completely. Through the EA Zoom meetings with different people and a therapist. I'll be 70 in October.
Okay, good.
And in the last, as I said, the last half year, so this childhood trauma kind of floated up.
Yeah.
And was really, really upsetting. Yeah. But the truth will set you free.
Yeah. One thing to really to give yourself strength for and understand is that you're ready to deal with it now.
Yes.
And that's really crucial. I mean, your highest planet is Jupiter in Sagittarius. I mean, you know, you want this resolved, and Venus, I mean, Sun Neptune conjunction in Libra, you know, it needs to be pretty. The trouble is, what you have to do is you have to be willing to let it be really ugly and know that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful. In the ugliness, it's exquisitely beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Scorpio understands that better than anyone else.
Thank you, Michael. That's just more grist for the mill. It's wonderful.
Good.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Bless you.
Thanks, Michael. That was so interesting. Okay, this brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you so much from all of us. We're looking forward to seeing you next time.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Lynn. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent.
Come back soon.
Thank you. No, thanks. I will. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Michael. It was great.
Thank you, Michael.